Welcome to Bibliophile.com's interview with the author series. In these videos, we interview some of the top authors in their field and explore their works and ideas in greater depth. Recently, Bibliophile had the opportunity to sit down with Peter W. Singer, strategist at the think tank New America and a professor of practice at Arizona State University. He has been described by the Wall Street Journal as the premier futurist in the national security environment, as well as appearing on Foreign Policy's top 100 global thinkers list. Peter's latest book, Burn-In, co-authored with August Cole, has been praised as a visionary new form of storytelling, a rollercoaster ride of science fiction blended with science fact. A techno-thriller backed up with approximately 40 pages of footnote references to real-world research, Burn-In is not only heart-thumping fiction, it is also a terrifying insight into the future of warfare and the offensive capabilities being developed by both state and non-state actors in the present day. I started off by asking Peter about the choice to use a genre blending fiction and real-world research for the book.
Cool. So Peter, congratulations on the release of Burn-In. Now, this is your second book in which you have used the genre of what you refer to as a useful fiction. Can you start off by just telling us a little bit more about why you chose to present your content in this useful fiction genre format instead of, say, just doing a straight non-fiction book about the future of warfare?
Well, first, thanks for having me. And the idea of useful fiction is we're both parents, and I liken it to sneaking fruit and veggies into a morning smoothie. So you get the enjoyable taste, but hopefully you also get some good stuff out of it as well. And the starting point for this was actually August Cole. He's my co-author on it. Our experience with our prior book, Ghost Fleet. We're both from the nonfiction world. I've written a series of books on issues of technology and warfare and work at a think tank. August was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. And yet we teamed up on Ghost Fleet really just to write an enjoyable novel. We had grown up both being, avid readers of everything from science fiction to early Tom Clancy, and wanted to give people that same kind of experience. And Ghost Fleet came out. It did well. It was a top summer read and all that. But it also struck a chord, particularly in militaries and governments around the world. So my nonfiction books had done well, and they'd been put on the reading lists of the different militaries and testimony to Congress and all that kind of stuff. But Ghost Fleet, this novel, was the one that got me invited to brief at the White House Situation Room. August got invited to the Nobel Institute. We shared its lessons with over 75 different government organizations and military units, everything from Australian Parliament to JSOC, which was the special operations team that got bin Laden. The US Navy even named a $3.6 billion ship program Ghost Fleet. And so it struck us that this idea, the combination of fiction but utilizing nonfiction research, could come together and be what we call useful fiction. It could be enjoyable, but also leave people with important takeaways. And so that's really what that started us on the journey on Burn-In, which was the idea of pick an important, interesting topic, but go after it hopefully in an entertaining manner where, for some people, it's just going to be the fun ride. They don't care about the education. For other people, it's going to be, wow, I learned so much from it, and it wasn't, painful. I didn't have to read a long white paper or a PowerPoint. And we can talk further about sort of the idea of the plot, but also that difference between a novel and a nonfiction or a PowerPoint.
I mean, staying with that topic of the plot, there's quite a contrast between your first work, Ghost Fleet and your new novel Burn In. I mean, a Ghost Fleet is about this great power conflict with China and America, whereas the protagonist in your new book is somewhat more hidden. This group of hackers or single hacker. Can you tell us more about how the two books differ and how perhaps Burn In develops on top of what you talked about in Ghost Fleet?
Sure, and that was frankly one of the other lessons learned for us on the project. So Ghost Fleet was it was a story of what a war between a U.S., a China, a Russia might look like. And what's notable about it is, we did the research for it and wrote it many years back. And there was, when we started out on that journey, there was a little bit of pushback from both people within the government and military. If you go back to 2013, all the focus was on terrorism, insurgency. The same thing in the publishing world. Even the Tom Clancy books were all about terrorism, and yet we were pointing out, hey, there is China is rising as a great power economically, politically, and there's growing tensions between it and not just its neighbors but also the U.S. And something that had been unthinkable for multiple generations, the great powers going to war, actually now is thinkable, not inevitable, but it is something that could happen. And we can explore that, and there's use in exploring that in both the nonfiction sense, but also it creates a much different context, much greater stakes. And so the format of Ghost Fleet was much like a Game of Thrones, a Winds of War by Herman Wouk, Clancy's Red Storm Rising, multiple characters, each on their own separate journeys. Sometimes they're crossing, sometimes they're not crossing, and but you get to see the war from the different perspectives and locations, on the ground, in the air, at sea, both sides of it. So you get all of these different points of view. And it's interesting. It allows you to sort of see it from different angles. That means it's a little more informative. It also means that you might have one little incident on one character's story that is a tiny detail there that has huge significance on another character, and they may never meet, never know each other exists. So it was great. It worked really well. Incredibly difficult on the editing end of it. If you know the game of Jenga, I think of it that way, where you're stacking things together. And if you made one edit in one sentence here in this character storyline, it could topple the whole entire book. And so, we literally built this like color-coded map of everything to figure it out. And so after that, we were like, oh man, if we're doing something again, we're not going to do it with those multiples that way. And you only get to spend a limited amount of time with a single character. And so Burn In is a story that follows a FBI agent. Her name is Keegan. Her separate interesting issue here, another sort of difference of this is it's a female lead protagonist, which is unfortunately and strangely very rare in this space. And when they are, the female characters are often kind of in techno thrillers are often the 1B. They're the helper to the male hero. And they're usually not all that well developed. They sort of have, one or two layers to them. In this case, Keegan, former Marine turned FBI agent, but she's also a mom of a 5-year-old. She's also in a marriage that's frankly falling apart. We follow her on the hunt for a new kind of terrorist who, and it's a back and forth. So it's two characters. We said, okay, we're not going to do 9. We brought it down to 2, and you get the sort of both sides of the hunt. And it's all set in Washington, D.C., roughly about 10 to 15 years from now. So we follow Keegan, and I'm not going to give everything away about the bad guy, but we follow the two of them as they go through Washington, D.C., It's a city that is familiar to a lot of people, so they go to places, the National Mall, the monuments. They actually go inside the White House, but they also go to locations that through them we get to see what cities will be like 10 to 15 years, any city. So they go to a train station. We get to see her in her apartment. They go to a Starbucks. And through their journey, one, we get kind of the cat and mouse and the scary, awful things that happen, and will she catch them? But also, by moving the dial forward, we get to see how new technologies like artificial intelligence, what they call the Internet of Things, automation, how are these going to affect each of these places and your life in it? What will it be like to go into a train station, which will have everything from face recognition cameras to augmented reality to outside there will be some driverless cars. What will it be? Who will greet you at that Starbucks? Oh, by the way, what will the bad guys be up to? What might they go after? What might they hack? That gives you a sort of, but the key is it's not fanciful science fiction. It's all grounded. So now we get to the nonfiction side. Baked into that story, that journey, are over 300 real world explanations and predictions of everything from, you'll walk away from the book understanding, okay, how does AI actually work? Or what is Amazon's real plan for using delivery drones, and how might that affect my life or my business? To how are the police going to actually use face recognition? To not just how will it be used, what will be the issues and dilemmas that are created by it? So we get to see the effects that it'll have on jobs, the effects that it'll have on inequality, the effects that it'll have on parenting. How does it, what are the questions that are different that Keegan and her husband are dealing with their daughter and the toys that she's playing with? Going back, how might a criminal, what will drive them? What might they go after? And it's not just that these are baked into the story. Like any nonfiction book, there's that little number at the end that takes you to the research endnote. So if you want, just like when you read a nonfiction book, when there's a certain detail that has a little number, not distracting in the text, you can keep reading and enjoying the novel. But for some people, they'll go, hold it. Okay, where's that from? And you get to see, hey, that's not what the authors dreamed up. That's actually Amazon's patent for it. Or, oh, you were intrigued by this. Here's a study where you can learn more about it. So here again, it's kind of like the ingredients list. You don't have to read it, but if you want, it's in the back of the book, and you can go and it both validates it and finds more on it. And so what's fun about that journey, I think, is we get to, again, take readers to places that might be familiar or places that are real that they'll never be able to go. It means everything, it's the fiction is there, but everything's drawn from the real world. So the way the carpet is in the scene at the White House, that's actually how the carpet is. Or when, not to plot spoil, when the bad guy carries out that certain kind of hack, that hack has actually already happened somewhere. So it can happen. It can hit another city, be it a Washington or be it your own. And so to me, that grounding, that detail, I think it, again, it informs, but I think it makes the fiction more enjoyable. That kind of nightmare scenario, the fact that this could happen, to me, that makes it even more compelling. And we've heard the same, interestingly, from wildly different groups. What's been fun about this mix is, I would argue we have the strangest cross of, they call them blurbers, endorsers. So on one end, we have like the former heads of the CIA, the NSA, the Canadian Army, the U.S. Marine Corps. They've said, I've enjoyed it, but I've also found it really useful. And then at the other end, we've had people like the creator of TV shows like Lost and Watchmen and the new Star Trek movies being like, I enjoyed this. And that is not a normal cross, but I think it's by that idea of bringing the two forms together.
You know, I for one, Peter, as I'm sure many other readers of Burn-In will find, my bookmarks in my Google browser have exploded since reading Burn-In. Having gone through, as you said, having gone through a lot of those footnotes, and thought that, I'd really like to read more about that. So I've got a lot of reading material waiting for me as well. You mentioned the main character, FBI Special Agent Keegan, and the main protagonist in your book, Peter. I was particularly struck by another relationship, which was between Keegan and her artificial intelligence assistant, Tams. I thought there was a lot of allegory in that relationship, as well as interesting insight on human and technological or robotic relationships. Could you tell us more about Keegan and Tams?
And what's great is both you and kind of the reader and Keegan themselves struggle with how to think of Tams. You know, we posited, do we call Tams a character? Do we call it a technology? Do we call it assistant? And so, and that's part of one of the underlying sort of themes of this, right? So Tams is, you know, like in any technology or military, it's an acronym, Tactical Autonomous Mobility System. TAMS is drawn from the real world. So essentially think of TAMS as, on the software side, the decision aids, Siri, Alexa, etc. These various artificial decision aids, move them slightly forward. And then on the hardware side, move the current robotics, kind of what's at prototype stage, move that forward and deploy it. So many people may have seen, for example, the YouTube videos of, you know, Boston Dynamics robots, you know, running or doing parkour or whatever. Take those two, put them together, and that's what TAMS is. So it's not dreamy science fiction. It's the technology moves slightly forward. We're going to plot spoil here. The subtitle of the book says it all. A novel of the real robotic revolution. And real is emphasized because this is not a story of Tam suddenly gains consciousness and tries to kill all the humans. We've seen that story again and again, and it's not a realistic story. So it's neither, to me, fascinating from a fictional sense, nor from a nonfiction is it accurate. It's more about this underlying question of, and again, in the real world too, how do we use and interact with increasingly intelligent machines that will surround us? And that is one of the kind of underlying themes. You know, it's just as Moby Dick is not actually a book about a hunt for a whale, right? There's underlying questions here too. And it's really about the essence of the human-machine relationship and how we have to figure that out. What roles are appropriate for machines, and appropriate you then unpack. Appropriate might be, is it the best at it? Which is different than appropriate in terms of kind of the should, legally, ethically, morally. Is it morally, legally, ethically appropriate? And then, okay, if I'm putting it in that role, how does it affect me? How does it affect the world? How do I relate to it? These are all questions. And what's right, you know, I'm talking to you about them in the last week or so, and speaking to people about the book. I've briefed these issues to groups that range from members of the US and the Canadian and British military, to a group of Wall Street investment bankers, to a group of police officers, as well as talk to a group of parents about it. All of us are trying to figure out, all of us have to figure out moving forward, these questions of the nature of the human-machine relationship. Again, whether it's at war, whether it's in policing, whether it's in banking, whether it's in your home. And part of that, you know, so you have these questions, and they seem very sci-fi, but they're real, they're here. And so what Keegan is on is a burn-in. A burn-in is a technical term where the mission is to essentially test a technology to learn from it. And that's her kind of mission set in the book. But then here again, the book is its own form of a burn-in. But then we get these sort of wonderful, character moments from it. Keegan definitely is a character. She's a she. She and you, the reader, find yourself thinking of Tams as a character. This was actually drawn from, here again, the real world, whether in war, to our personal lives. In war, I did a book many years back called Wired for War. There was a nonfiction book looking at the early uses of robotics in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And soldiers there would tell how they were using robots for things like finding roadside bombs. When their robot, in one situation in Iraq, got stuck in the mud and the enemy was shooting machine guns at them, a soldier ran out under heavy machine gun fire to rescue their robot. They would never rescue a Jeep or Humvee. They rescue the robot. In another situation, a robot got blown up by a roadside bomb. And that night they had a funeral for it. You would never have a funeral for your broken M16 rifle, but they did for this. And for them, it was because there's something different about a machine that has that little bit of intelligence and mobility, and even more so, it's doing jobs for you. And that was back in the mid-2000s with a machine that didn't look like a person, couldn't talk to you, was mostly remote controlled. What happens is they become more and more intelligent. They become bipedal, which we're already starting to see. They work alongside you. They're in your home. And, the anecdotal version of this is we've got one of these in our home. We have an Alexa, and we use it for, I use it for like timing when I'm cooking. And a couple of weeks back, I was cooking and, set the timer, and the alarm goes off and it won't stop. It doesn't hear me when I tell it to go off. And I was having a bad coronavirus day and I just started yelling at it, Alexa, turn the timer up, turn the timer up. I would never yell that way at my oven or at a stopwatch, but I was yelling at Alexa. There's also, underlying questions of this that point to so much else. The first time Keegan meets Tam, notice I said meets, and I'm saying first time she met her car, first time she meets Tam's, it speaks to her, and it speaks to her in a voice of a female. And there's this sort of revealing moment where, Keegan's like, nope, reprogram. And it's revealing both about, in just a sentence, it reveals, a lot of the issues that we also have of packing different identities into our robots. For example, we genderize them. It also reveals a lot about Keegan. She's no nonsense. She's not going to take crap, especially from a robot. And so, here again, we've just talked about the relationship side, but then you can get to larger issues like, okay, it's an intelligent machine. It's always, therefore, learning. That always learning has a couple of implications from it that we watch through the relationship with Keegan. One is that it's, no matter what, it's always observing, it's always learning. That means it is drawing from you both what you deliberately teach it and what you inadvertently teach it. So in many ways, it's a lot like parenting. And it takes that information and churns it and comes out in ways that some way may be exact modeling. In other ways, it kind of goes through the algorithms just like your kids in the brain, and it comes out in unexpected manners. So there's that. And we get to play with that and have a lot of fun with that. But there's another part, which is because it's always learning, it's always getting better. And we go back to that notion of what roles are appropriate or not. It means it can start to do more and more. And it also can start to do more and more what you can do. And then you get into the hold it, and am I teaching my own replacement? And here again, this is not drawn sci-fi. Interesting example we've already seen of that is in the US, there's a major network that owns most of the radio stations for pop music. And last year, the DJs on it essentially trained AI how to be a DJ. And you can guess what happened next. They all then got fired.
Well, I feel sorry for them, but at the same time, I have to say, you kind of could have seen that one coming, perhaps.
But what was their? We go back. What was their choice, right? And maybe I'll be the one who I'll be left standing. And it's just my peers are the ones that are going to lose their job. And so again, these seem like super sci-fi questions, and yet they're in the here and now, or they play out over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And so, that's, what we've had an interesting question is like, is this book, is it techno thriller? Is it science fiction? Is it nonfiction? Because the research back, they all cross together. And to me, that's the fun of it. We don't have to have these stovepipes, guess what? Just because techno thrillers in the past didn't have robotics in them, whether it's the Clancy's or the Crichtons or whatever, they're going to, because just like in the past, bankers, teachers, doctors, police officers, soldiers didn't have robotics a long time. They do now, or they're going to. So, you take that in turn, the things that seem like way futuristic science fiction that Asimov wrestled with, well, guess what? They're now about in our own real city, in our own, either our lives or our kids' lives. So you don't have to think about them as being futuristic or set on another planet. They now are here. And that, bringing that together to me is just, so much fun, but also hopefully informative.
I think the part of the narrative in Burn-In that actually came to strike me as amongst the most worrying from my perspective was this broadening of warfare that is described in the book, Peter, whereby it seems that everyday citizens are now targets of all possible forms of attack. I know you've also previously spoken about this changing of the laws of war and what is a legitimate target in war of the future.
Yes, and here again is one of those other both themes, but also real world lessons from it. One of the themes of it is how there's a very fine line between utopian and dystopian views of the future, both in our fictional frames, but also in what's coming out of places like Silicon Valley or Beijing or whatnot. That you think of various technologies, whether it's driverless cars and delivery drones to AI surveillance, face recognition. Each one of them are being deployed, and they're being deployed for reasons that range from to make money, to make customers' lives easier, to raise security, be it national security, public security, huge amount of deployment of this post-coronavirus for health security, but that they also, if you look at them from another perspective, and particularly depending on where you are in that society, one person's utopia can be another person's utter dystopia. Each, face recognition, it aids again in security. It's being deployed by, we see companies that range from the technology, social media platforms to fast food companies like Kentucky Fried Chicken, all having face recognition projects. And yet, for a lot of people listening to this, they'll go, "Ooh, that feels really creepy. That feels really scary." And it also depends on sometimes your income level, how you, and we play that out in Burn-In in terms of, yes, it's a world of driverless cars and robotics, but you're still going to have both rich and poor. You're still going to have crime, homelessness. Hate to tell people, you'll have driverless cars, but we aren't getting rid of traffic. So there's that fine line aspect of it. And one of the things that connects to this is this other issue that you raise, which is as we network more and more of our world using the internet, not just to communicate like you and I, but to run our systems, a smart city, a smart home, a smart car, you get these incredible conveniences. You get, all sorts of things that will make your life better in some ways. It also hopefully will help the planet. It's one of the ways of going after global climate change. But ... we're also bringing all of the cybersecurity issues of the last generation and moving them into our things. So the issue becomes not just merely someone stealing your email, stealing your credit card. It becomes the ability to create kinetic action, now we'll plot spoil a little bit, murder someone in a home without ever leaving their own home by using the smart home systems to change what they do. Or maybe they go after an entire city. Maybe, for example, the water treatment plant, which has been networked, can be affected. I won't give away the full burn-in story, so I'll give you a related one from the real world. Just about 3 weeks ago in Israel, their water treatment system, hackers went into the network and tried to go after the chlorine level. So they weren't stealing, from the Israelis, how do I build a water treatment system? They were, how do I change the amount of chemicals in it? I can assure you, and now I will plot spoil, that can be done in many other cities, but they might not go after the chlorine level. They might go after something else. It might be flooding. It might be causing things to crash. And so what that means is it's contrary to kind of our views of war and security, now everyone can be a target. If you want to hit someone from a distance, you can use these means. It also means that everyone can potentially, what we call it, lowers the barrier to entry. And so what you get is not just states, governments like a Soviet Union or China or whatnot, but all the way down to individuals with the powers that a Soviet Union couldn't do in the past. And the nonfiction lesson from this is what we call super empowered individuals. This is not Marvel, Avengers, Superman, superpowers. It's rather the idea that individuals now have greater power. And we play that out through the characters in Burn-In. It might be an individual hacker who can hold an entire city hostage and recreate things that once only the gods could dream of, but in the real. And here again, we've got the research note to, when they do this thing to a city, here's actually, hey, it could happen. Or it might be, and we're seeing examples of, it might be a billionaire who has influence over an entire nation in a way that, the president or the prime minister didn't have in the recent past. And so that, it gives you these new things to explore with characters, but it also points to issues in the real world. The lessons, for example, of, hey, as we wire up our cities, we need to remember the cybersecurity side of this. Unfortunately, in the real world, we're not. This is one of the lessons that we've been briefing people on coming out of Burn-In. To give an example, over 98% of traffic from Internet of Things, these are, smart car being woven into the something in your apartment or home, a smart thermostat. Over 98% of them, their communication is not encrypted. And so it's opening up vulnerabilities that because we're not baking it in, or it might be very specific things. To give like a fun example that sort of plot spoils a little bit, we did an interview with someone who worked on not the water treatment plant, but the water systems in terms of the stormwater, flooding, sewage systems, the pipes that exit water from a city. And Washington, D.C. is a city, like many other cities, that was built hundreds of years back. And in its case, it was built on a floodplain. Originally, it was mostly swampland. And a series of things were put into place over the last century to keep it from flooding. For listeners who want to get a sort of sense of the imagery, Google 1936 Washington, D.C. flood. And you can see sort of the scale of flooding that used to happen, used to reach all the way over deep into the city where the famous Lincoln Memorial is and the like, all the way to the edge of the White House. And a series of measures were put into place. And we talked to someone who talked about in the recent years, they've been updating it, and for good reason, automating parts of that system. But ... it means that there are a handful of valves that, if they get affected, could open up the city to a recreation of that flood. And as we're talking, his wife is in the background, and she goes, "You don't know him that well. Don't tell him which valves." And we don't, reveal that in the book. But what I'm getting at is it's a real world example of some of the vulnerabilities that, we're putting in for efficiency reason, but we're also opening up new threats and dangers. And here again, to me, that means that scene is just all the more chilling because, hey, hold on, it could happen.
As I read Burn-In, I cast my mind back to Ghost Fleet quite a lot. And in Ghost Fleet, the open protagonist is, of course, China. But the society that you describe in Burn-In, at least to me, seemed to have a current mirror in modern day China, to the extent that we see adoption of 5G technologies and other internet-based technologies such as digital payment solutions, which are much more prevalent in China. Is Burn-In meant as a wake-up call to the American establishment or Western military establishments that they are perhaps losing the innovation battle against China?
There's some lessons from it, but I don't think it's about that kind of arms race. It's a domestic setting. It's set, inside the U.S., but here again, it could be set almost in any city. In that, we follow the journey of a set of characters across this city that's been changed by technology. Now, there are certain things that people who know Washington, D.C. will really kind of resonate with, or it also unveils sort of secret histories of certain things in Washington, D.C. So it does make it particular to that. But it's more really about the forces of AI, automation, the Internet of Things, how they're changing our lives, here again, from family to business to policing on up. Now, what might be different and parts of it that perhaps could not play out in a China or would play differently is that, in my mind, the arms race, putting that in quotation marks of it's not of AIs, it's not a Cold War style, who has the better or most missiles. We're all, as Burn-In explorers, getting AI, and there's no, contrary to science fiction, it's not one singular super intelligence like, HAL from Arthur C. Clarke 2001. It's AI woven into, everything from our homes to your bank to your doctor using it. The robotics will come in lots of different forms, from a tiny delivery drone to a large truck to a walking robot, all these different forms. But basically, there's the arms race side to go. There is two different visions of AI and how you use it. The Chinese government has a fairly centralized vision where it has pre-chosen its corporate champions, and those handful of companies have to share all information with the government. And so you will have, and it's viewed as a measure of a means of social control. And then you get things like the social credits system, the scoring system, and the like. So it's a massive amount of information collected, but also enforced sharing to the government. By contrast, in most democracies, the model, you still have a huge amount of information collection and sharing, but it's sort of broken up where the government's doing some, You have the police doing some, you have the public health network doing some, but you also have the different corporations that are each doing their collection. And oh, by the way, some of it they're sharing with government, some of it they're not. They're definitely not sharing with each other. So as you go through a city, be it a London, a Sydney, a Washington, D.C., and then will be interesting to see what plays out in cities like, for example, a Bangkok, which model they follow. But in the democracy model, where you go, there you will definitely see information being collected on you, but it will be accessed and used by different actors. So when you're in the Starbucks, you're definitely being observed and tracked by AI, but that's different than when you're in the train station or when you're in your home. The police will have access to forms of data of different levels dependent on where the criminal is. And so it's a little bit more of a kind of cacophony. And also it means you get a different form of privacy. You don't have complete privacy. And so that's one of the last sort of issues that comes out of it. The lessons is that in most democracies, we will have to figure out where we believe we're most comfortable between security, privacy, convenience, whether it's the toys that our kids use to you as a doctor or lawyer or whatever. You will have to choose where in that you are most comfortable with. In a China, in a Beijing, the government's chosen for you. It's chosen for you, the security model. You don't get to say, hey, I choose convenience and therefore I'm giving up an amount of security, or I choose security and I'm giving up some of my privacy. So we have the choice, we have the agency, and understanding that is one of the last issues of burn-in.
Speaking about finding and setting our own levels of comfort towards these new technologies, Peter, did doing the research for burn-in and writing burn-in cause you to rethink your own relationship with technology?
Oh, definitely. And it caused me to think not just my relationship, but my kids and what they learn and what prepares them for this world to come.
Thanks for watching the latest episode in Bibliofine.com's video series, Interview with the Author. Peter's book, Burn-In, is available now, and there's a link below in the video description if you'd like to know more. There's also a link to Peter's personal website and his Twitter to enable you to keep up to date on the technologies of future warfare. If you enjoyed our video today, please be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and remember to click the bell icon to be sure to receive the latest updates and further author interviews from Bibliofine.com. Alternatively, you can check out our website, which is linked below, as well as our presence on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. That's all for this time. See you on the next edition of Interview with the Author.